Welcome to Hypnos Stories. I am so glad you're here tonight. Before we begin, I want to take just a moment to say something to you directly. If you enjoy this channel, if these stories have helped you find rest on a difficult night, or given you a few hours of peace in the middle of a busy week, please consider leaving a like on this video. It takes just a second, and it means more than you might think. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Hypnos Stories. Subscribing is completely free, and it ensures that new stories find their way to you each week. Stories inspired by ancient mythology, by the wonders of the natural world, by the deep and quiet places that exist just beyond the edges of ordinary life. We also love hearing from you in the comments. If there is a story you would like us to tell, a myth you have always been curious about, a place in the natural world you would like to visit through sound and imagination, a civilization whose gods and heroes you would like to know better, leave it in the comments below. Every suggestion is read. Every story request is considered. This channel exists because of you, and it grows because of you. And the stories we tell are shaped, more than you might realize, by what you ask for. So thank you for being here, for listening, for trusting us with your nights. And now, let us begin. Find a comfortable position. Let your body settle completely into whatever is beneath you. Feel the weight of your shoulders, releasing the weight of your arms, heavy and warm, the weight of your legs, sinking deeper. Take a slow breath in through your nose. Hold it gently for just a moment and let it go, slowly, through your mouth. Again, breathe in and out. With every breath, the day grows further away. The noise of it, the urgency of it, all of it softening now, dissolving like mist in the quiet of an early morning. There is nothing left to carry tonight, nothing left to solve, nothing left to prove, nothing left to finish, just this moment, just this darkness, just this breath. You have made it through another day, whatever that day contained, whatever it asked of you, whatever it took from you, whatever it left unfinished and waiting for tomorrow. It is behind you now. And this moment, right here, right now, belongs entirely to you. No obligations, no demands, no one needing anything from you. Just rest. There is a story waiting for you tonight. An ancient story. A story that has been told and retold for thousands of years, because something in it is true in a way that goes deeper than facts, deeper than history, deeper than anything that can be fully explained. It is a story made for exactly this moment, for exactly this quietness, for exactly the kind of rest that your body is already beginning to find. So breathe and let go and follow me. Tonight, I am going to tell you about the end of the world, not your world, not this world, but a world that existed in the old Norse understanding as completely and as genuinely as any world has ever existed. A world of 9 realms hanging on the branches of a great ash tree, a world of gods and giants and dwarves and the walking dead, a world that had been created from the body of a primordial giant, and that would end, as the Norns had always known it would end, in fire and flood, and the final meeting of every force that had been in opposition since the beginning. This is the story of Ragnarok, and of the god who, more than any other, set it in motion. Loki, shape changer, trickster, father of monsters, blood brother of Odin. the most complicated figure in all of Norse mythology, a being so difficult to categorize that scholars have argued about his nature for centuries without reaching any satisfying conclusion. Was he a villain? A necessary chaos? A tragic figure destroyed by his own contradictions? All of these, perhaps. None of them entirely. To understand Ragnarok, we must first understand Loki. And to understand Loki, we must go back to the very beginning of his story, to the early days of Asgard, when the 9 worlds were still young, and the relationship between gods and giants was not yet the permanent hostility it would eventually become. Loki was the son of a giant named Farbauti, and a being named Laufey, sometimes called Nao, whose nature is debated, but who was associated in the old texts with something light and thin and leaf-like, the kind of presence that moves easily between categories, that resists firm definition. From his parents, Loki inherited contradictions. From his father's giant nature, he inherited size. Not physical size, but the quality of largeness, the quality of existing at a scale that pressed against the boundaries of whatever space contained him. From his mother's lightness, he inherited quickness of thought, of movement, of transformation. The combination produced something that neither the gods nor the giants fully knew what to do with. He was not a god by birth, but Odin, the All-Father, had made him a blood brother, had sworn an oath with him in the old way, cutting palms and pressing them together, and that oath meant that Loki had a place in Asgard, a seat at the table of the gods, a relationship with the divine world that no other giant had ever been given. He was brilliant, genuinely extraordinarily brilliant, in the particular way that being simultaneously an outsider and an insider makes a certain kind of mind brilliant, seeing clearly what those fully inside cannot see, understanding the rules well enough to work around them in ways that those who had always lived within them could not easily conceive. Let that complexity settle into you now. The particular nature of someone who belongs everywhere and nowhere at once, who sees clearly precisely because they stand slightly apart. Breathe and rest. In the early days, Loki's cleverness served the gods well. There are stories, many of them, of Loki getting the gods into trouble through some impulsive action or ill-considered trick, and then getting them out of trouble through some equally clever solution that he produced apparently from nowhere. He helped Thor recover Mjolnir when it was stolen. He helped negotiate the building of Asgard's great walls when the gods needed fortification but lacked the resources to build it themselves. A negotiation that involved a builder, a horse, a wager that seemed safe until it didn't, and a solution that Loki arrived at by transforming himself into a mare and leading the builder's stallion on a chase through the wilderness for long enough that the deadline was missed and the deal could be renegotiated. The horse that resulted from that particular adventure became Sleipnir, the 8-legged horse who would carry Odin across the 9 worlds, perhaps the fastest and most sure-footed creature in existence. Loki gave this horse to Odin as casually as someone might give a minor gift without apparent awareness of the gift's significance. This was characteristic of him. His most consequential acts were performed with the lightness of someone who did not fully reckon the weight of what they were doing. He helped the gods acquire their greatest treasures, Mjolnir, Odin's spear, Gungnir, the ship Skidbladnir that could sail any sea and be folded up and put in a pocket when not in use, through a wager with dwarves that almost went catastrophically wrong, saved at the last moment by a technicality that Loki had noticed and exploited with the precision of someone who had been looking for exactly that kind of exit. He was useful, often genuinely, indispensably useful, and he knew it, and the gods knew it, and this knowledge that they needed him, that his particular combination of cleverness and shape-shifting and outsider perspective was not something they could easily replace, gave him a freedom within Asgard that no one else quite had. He pushed further than he should have. He said things that other gods would not say about the other gods, and got away with it because he was Loki, and because what he said was often true in ways that made it simultaneously infuriating and impossible to simply dismiss. He was reckless in his cleverness, careless with his power, not precisely malicious, but certainly not careful. Not careful in the way that the long consequences of actions require. Not careful in the way of someone who looks far enough ahead to see where a path is going, rather than simply enjoying the path in the moment of walking it. And then came the death of Baldur. Let that name settle into the quiet now. Baldur, the most beloved of all the gods, the one whose death would change everything. Breathe and rest. Baldur was the son of Odin and Frigg, and he was, by every account, the most beautiful and the most beloved of the gods. Not beloved in the way that Thor was beloved, through impressive deeds and protection, and the reassuring presence of someone who could handle whatever needed handling. Baldur was beloved in a different way, a quieter way. He was warm, genuinely, uncomplicatedly warm, in the way that certain people are warm, people whose presence makes the rooms they enter feel lighter, and the conversations they join feel more honest, and the difficulties that seemed large before they arrived seem afterward more manageable. He radiated something that the old texts try to capture with words like radiance and brightness and the light of the sun, though these physical descriptions are clearly standing in for something more interior, something about the quality of his presence rather than simply the appearance of his face. Everything loved Baldur, not just the gods. Everything. The animals and the plants and the stones and the metals, everything that existed in the 9 worlds, loved Baldur in its own way, was drawn to him, would do nothing that could harm him. His mother Frigg understood that her son was going to die. The dreams had told her, the kind of dreams that gods take seriously, the dreams that carry weight and specific quality of truth that ordinary dreams do not carry. She was the goddess of foreknowledge and home, and the protection of those within it, and she could not sit with the knowledge of her son's approaching death without doing something about it. She traveled the 9 worlds, every being, every substance, everything that existed. She extracted an oath from each one, an oath not to harm Baldur. Fire swore it, water swore it, iron and every kind of metal swore it, stone swore it, earth swore it, every disease swore it, every animal swore it, every bird, every serpent. The gods themselves swore it. And when it was done, when every oath had been given, the gods celebrated in the way gods celebrate, by making a game of it. They would throw things at Baldur, weapons, stones, everything they could find, and everything bounced off him harmlessly, the oaths holding, the world's love for him made physically manifest in his absolute invulnerability. It was a game that delighted everyone except Loki. Loki watched the game with an expression that was, to anyone paying attention, not quite the same as the expressions of everyone around him. He found an old woman and spoke with her, a woman who turned out, in some versions of the story, to be Frigg herself, or someone close to Frigg, someone who knew the detail that Loki was looking for. There was one thing Frigg had not asked, one thing so small and so young and so seemingly insignificant that she had passed it by on her journey through the 9 worlds. The mistletoe, a small plant, a parasite growing on the bark of other trees, neither fully alive in its own right, nor fully part of its host, existing in a kind of in-between state that perhaps reminded someone of another being who existed between categories. Loki found the mistletoe. He shaped it into a dart, and he brought it to the game. Let that small and terrible detail settle into you now. The one exception in an otherwise complete protection, the single gap in an otherwise impenetrable oath. Breathe and rest. Baldur's blind brother was named Hodur. He stood apart from the game, unable to participate, unable to see the target, smiling at the sounds of celebration around him, but not quite part of it in the way that those who could see were part of it. Loki approached him with the particular gentleness of someone who is about to do something that cannot be undone and knows it and does it anyway, and will live in the knowledge of it for the rest of their existence. He guided Hodur's hand. He placed the mistletoe dart in it. He pointed him in the right direction, and Hodur threw. The dart struck Baldur. Baldur fell. The silence that followed was unlike any silence the 9 worlds had ever contained. The gods stood and stared. They could not speak. The understanding of what had just happened pressed so completely against the edges of what was conceivable that the mind could not immediately find its way to a response. Then Frigg spoke. She asked who would ride to Hel, the realm of the dead, to ask for her son back. A god named Hermod volunteered, and Odin gave him Sleipnir, the 8-legged horse, and Hermod rode for 9 days and 9 nights, through increasingly dark and cold landscapes, until he came to the hall of Hel, goddess of the dead, daughter of Loki, ruler of the realm where those who did not die in battle went. He found Baldur there, sitting in the Sword of Honor, because even in the realm of the dead, Baldur's nature made him the most honored guest in any room. Hermod made his request. Hel listened. She set her condition. If everything in every one of the 9 worlds would weep for Baldur, she said, then she would release him. Every being, every substance, everything that existed. If all of them wept, the death would be undone. The gods sent messengers throughout the 9 worlds, asking everything to weep, and everything wept. The trees wept, the stones wept, the metals wept, the animals and the birds and the fish. The gods wept openly, without shame. Everything wept, except one. In a cave, messengers found a giantess who called herself Thok, a name that in the Old Norse meant gratitude, which is perhaps a kind of dark joke that the old storytellers were making with Loki's characteristic irony. Thok said that Baldur had never done anything for her. She said, let Hel keep what she had. She would not weep. The messengers returned. The condition was not met. Baldur remained in Hel, and the giantess in the cave, it was understood, though not stated directly, by everyone who heard this story, had been Loki. in disguise, the one exception to the world's grief, the one gap in the mourning, as certain and deliberate as the one gap in the protection. Let that echo move through you now. The deliberate refusal to grieve, the one dry eye in a world of tears. And what it cost, and what it set in motion. Breathe and rest. The gods captured Loki. It did not happen immediately. He fled, as he always fled, when consequences arrived. Quickly and cleverly, transforming himself, hiding himself in a waterfall in the form of a salmon, a choice that seemed safe until the gods invented the fishing net specifically to catch him, a piece of technology that it is said Loki himself had invented first in a moment of idle creativity, and which the gods found the plans for in his abandoned fire and used to capture him in the water. There is something characteristic about Loki being caught with a tool of his own devising, his own cleverness, turned against him. The gods brought him before a judgment that had no legal precedent. There were no laws that covered what Loki had done, no established punishment for engineering the death of the most beloved of the gods and then preventing his return. They created a punishment that matched the crime. They took Loki to a cave deep in the earth. They bound him with the entrails of his own son, transformed by divine magic into chains that were stronger than any metal. Above him, they placed a serpent fixed to the cave ceiling so that its venom dripped directly onto his face. His wife Sigyn sat beside him. She held a bowl above his face to catch the venom. When the bowl filled, she had to turn away to empty it. In those moments when the venom fell on him directly, Loki writhed in pain so intense that the earth shook with it. This, the Norse people said, was the explanation for earthquakes. Loki in his cave, suffering. He would remain there until Ragnarok. Let the patience of that waiting settle into you now. The long stillness before the storm. The silence of something enormous, contained, waiting for the moment of its release. Breathe and rest. How long did he wait? The old texts do not specify. Time in Norse mythology does not always follow the patterns of human time. The gods are long-lived, and the mythological events they inhabit sometimes span what would be centuries in mortal reckoning, sometimes seem to compress into single dramatic moments. Long enough for the wound of what had happened to calcify into something permanent. Long enough for the patience required to be not ordinary patience, but the patience of someone who has nothing left to lose, and therefore no reason to hurry. And in the cave, in the darkness, in the intervals when Sigyn turned away, and the venom fell, and the earth shook with his pain, Loki thought about what he would do when the chains broke. He had always been the one who could see clearly, the one who understood the structures of the 9 worlds well enough to find their weaknesses, their exceptions, their single gaps in otherwise complete protections. He had seen the structure of the divine order clearly for all of his existence, and now in the dark, he saw its end just as clearly. He had always known this was coming. The Norns had woven it from the beginning. Ragnarok was not a mistake, or an accident, or the result of poor planning by the gods. It was the destination that had always been there, written into the fabric of this world from before the first word of the first story. Loki had simply, in the death of Baldur, begun the final chapter, the chapter that ended everything. and began something else. The signs of Ragnarok came first, before the battle, before the breaking of the chains, before the final meeting of every force that had been held in opposition since the world began. First came Fimbulwinter, 3 winters in succession with no summer between them. 3 years of cold and darkness and snow that did not melt, of sun that rose too low and too briefly to warm anything, of crops that could not grow, and animals that could not find food, and humans who could not survive on what remained. The cold was not simply weather. It was a thinning of the distance between the ordered world and the chaos that had always existed at its edges, a weakening of the boundaries that the gods had maintained since the beginning of time, the first sign that the machinery of the cosmos was reaching the end of its designed life. During Fimbulwinter, the bonds that held society together failed. Brothers turned against brothers, fathers against sons. The moral agreements that make civilization possible began to dissolve under the pressure of survival, the way all agreements eventually dissolve when the conditions that make them viable disappear. This too was part of Ragnarok, not just the battle of the gods, but the unraveling of the human world that preceded it. Then came the signs in the sky and the sea. The great wolf Fenrir, who had been bound since the gods tricked him into chains as a pup, broke free. Fenrir was another of Loki's children. The gods had raised him in Asgard, watching him grow with increasing alarm, recognizing in his expanding size and power something that could not be contained within the ordinary structures of the divine world. They had bound him with the impossible chain the dwarves made. Gleipnir, thin as a ribbon and stronger than any metal, made from things that do not exist. Fenrir had accepted the binding only on the condition that one of the gods place a hand in his mouth as a pledge of good faith. Tyr, the god of justice, had placed his hand in the wolf's mouth. When the binding held and Fenrir found himself trapped, he closed his jaws. Tyr lost his hand, and Fenrir waited, as Loki waited in his binding, for the moment when the binding would break. Now it broke. The wolf was free. His mouth opened so wide that his upper jaw scraped the sky, and his lower jaw dragged along the ground, and he ran toward the place where the final battle would be fought. His howl the sound that the worlds make when the end is no longer approaching but has arrived. Let that howl settle into the distance now, far away, ancient and enormous, and belonging to a different world than the one you rest in. Breathe and rest. The Midgard serpent stirred in the deep ocean. Jormungandr, the world encircler, Loki's other monstrous child, who had been cast into the ocean by Odin and had grown so large over the long centuries that its body encircled the entire world, tail in its own mouth, a living boundary between the ordered world and the chaos beyond. When the serpent released its tail and rose from the ocean, the waters surged outward in waves so enormous they reached across the land, flooding everything within reach, the sea suddenly present in places that had never known it. The ship Naglfar set sail. Naglfar, the ship made from the fingernails and toenails of the dead, an ancient vessel built over countless generations from the most intimate remnants of every human who had ever died, a vessel so enormous it could carry an army of giants and monsters and everything that had ever opposed the divine order. Loki's chains broke in the same moment. He came out of the cave blinking. Sigyn beside him, the empty bowl still in her hands. He looked around at the changing world with eyes that had spent a very long time in darkness and now saw everything with the particular clarity of someone newly freed. He went to the shore, he took command of Naglfar, and he sailed it toward the plain of Vigrid, the field at the center of everything where the final battle was always going to be fought. In Asgard, Heimdall blew his horn, the Gjallarhorn. The sound it made was not a sound that could be heard with the ears so much as felt in the structure of existence itself, a vibration that moved through the 9 worlds simultaneously, reaching every being in every realm, the signal that had been prepared for and dreaded since the beginning of time. The gods armed themselves. Odin went to the well of Mimir one final time, to drink the wisdom he had sacrificed his eye for, to know what could be known about what was coming. He returned to Asgard, put on his armor, took up Gungnir, his great spear, rode out on Sleipnir, his 8-legged horse, at the head of the gods and the warriors of Valhalla, all of them moving toward Vigrid, all of them understanding what waited there, none of them turning back. There is something in this that the Norse people understood about fate and choice that seems contradictory until you sit with it long enough. The gods knew they were going to lose. Odin knew from the well of Mimir exactly how the battle would end. Thor knew he would kill the Midgard serpent and take 9 steps before the venom brought him down. Frey knew he would face Surtur, the fire giant, without his sword, which he had given away, and that the meeting would end badly. They knew, and they went anyway. Let that particular kind of courage settle into you now, the courage of going forward when you know what is waiting, not from ignorance of the cost, but from something deeper than the calculation of costs. Breathe and rest. The Battle of Vigrid was everything the old stories promised. Every conflict that had been building since the beginning of the 9 worlds arrived at its resolution on that plain. Odin and Fenrir met, the Allfather and the wolf, the divine king, and the creature of chaos that had grown in Asgard's own halls and been bound by Asgard's own chains, facing each other at last without any binding between them. The wolf swallowed Odin whole. This is the moment the old texts do not linger on. It is stated directly, without dramatic elaboration, without extensive description of the combat that preceded it. Odin was swallowed by the wolf, the king of the gods, the Allfather, the one who had sacrificed an eye for wisdom and hung on Yggdrasil for 9 days for the runes and spent his entire divine existence preparing for this moment, gone. Then Vidar, Odin's son, stepped forward. He had been prepared specifically for this moment. His boot was made from all the scraps of leather that cobblers had ever trimmed away, gathered over countless generations, a divine object that was simultaneously ordinary and extraordinary, assembled from the smallest and most overlooked pieces of human craft. He placed his foot on Fenrir's jaw. He grabbed the wolf's upper jaw with his hands, and he tore the wolf apart. Odin was avenged. The wolf was dead. Thor fought the Midgard serpent, and the outcome was exactly what he had known it would be. He killed it. The serpent that had encircled the entire world, that had matched him in every previous encounter, that had represented the limit of what his strength could accomplish. He killed it, and then took 9 steps and fell. The venom from the serpent's body, released in death, was more than even Thor could survive. 9 steps, exactly 9. And then the strongest of the gods, the protector of Midgard, the thunder that had rolled across the sky since the world began, was still. Frey met Surtur, the fire giant, without his sword. The outcome was what everyone had known it would be. Let these endings settle quietly around you now, each one arriving exactly as it was always going to arrive. The dignity of things that meet their endings without flinching. Breathe and rest. Loki and Heimdall met on the battlefield. These two had been opponents since the beginning, the watchman of the gods and the trickster, order and chaos, the one who saw everything coming from a distance, and the one who slipped past every watch. They killed each other, both of them, simultaneously. There is something in this that feels like the only possible ending for this particular rivalry. Not one defeating the other, not order prevailing over chaos or chaos over order, but both of them ending together. Neither one able to exist without the other. Neither one capable of outlasting the other, even at the final moment of everything. Surtur, the fire giant, who had stood at the border of Muspelheim since before the gods were born, since before the world was made, the embodiment of the primordial fire that had always existed at the southern edge of everything. Surtur raised his flaming sword and swept it across the 9 worlds. The world tree burned. Yggdrasil, the great ash that had held the 9 worlds in its branches and roots since the beginning, that had endured the gnawing of Nidhogg and the running of Ratatoskr and the grazing of stags in its highest branches for uncountable years. It burned. The worlds slid from its branches. The earth sank into the sea. The stars fell from the sky. The sun went dark. And for a moment outside of time, a moment that has no duration because duration requires a world within which time can pass, there was nothing. The formless void that had existed before the world was made returned, not forever, but for the length of that between moment. The deep dark and the deep quiet, and the deep nothing that is not an ending but a pause. Let that pause come to you now. The specific quality of nothing, not frightening nothing, but the nothing that precedes, that holds within it everything that comes next. Breathe and rest. And then the earth rose again. This is the part of the Ragnarok story that is less often told, the part that the dramatic telling of the battle tends to overshadow, the part that the Norse people considered at least as important as everything that had come before it. The earth rose from the sea, green and new. Waterfalls flowed. Eagles flew above them, hunting fish in the rivers that ran fresh and clear across the new landscape. The grain grew by itself without planting in fields that had never known a plow. The sun that had gone dark in the final moment of the old world, had a daughter, and the daughter rose in her mother's place, brighter than her mother had been, warming a world that was younger and greener and less complicated than the one that had been consumed by Surtur's fire. Some of the gods survived. Not Odin, not Thor, not Frey, but their sons, Vidar, who had avenged his father, and Vali, and Thor's sons, Modi and Magni, who carried Mjolnir between them into the new world, and Baldur, who had been in hell since Loki's dart had ended his life, returned from the realm of the dead, because the old world was over, and in the new world, The things that the old world had lost were restored. Baldur returned, and with him Hodur, his blind brother, the one whose hand Loki had guided, who had thrown the mistletoe dart without knowing what it was or what it would do, who had spent the long years since in hell with his brother, as innocent in death as he had been in the moment that ended Baldur's life. Both of them returned. They sat together in the new world and spoke to each other. And what they spoke of, the old texts tell us, were the old stories, the stories of what had happened before, of the gods and the giants and Loki, and the long preparation for the battle that had consumed everything. They remembered. And in the remembering, the old world was preserved, not as a living world, but as a story that could be told in the new world and would carry forward everything the old world had been and done and suffered. And 2 humans survived Ragnarok as well, a man named Lif and a woman named Lifthrasir. Life and the will to live had hidden inside Yggdrasil during the fire, protected by the tree even as the tree burned, emerging afterward into the new world as the only 2 humans in existence, the new beginning of the human story. They found the new world around them, green and fresh and entirely open, without history, without the weight of everything that had come before, just the world beginning again, exactly as it had begun the first time, from almost nothing, with almost infinite possibility. Let that possibility settle into you now. The particular quality of a beginning, the lightness of a world that has not yet accumulated its weight, the freshness of air that has never been breathed before. Breathe and rest. This is the story of Ragnarok. Not simply an ending, but the ending that was always also a beginning. The Norse people who told this story for centuries were not a people who despaired at the thought of ending. They were a people who understood, perhaps more clearly than most, that endings are the conditions of beginnings, that the world that had to be consumed by fire to make way for the green world was not destroyed but transformed, that Baldur returning from hell in the new world was not simply a happy ending tacked onto a tragedy, but the whole point, that the most beloved thing, the thing that chaos had most wanted to prevent, was also the most indestructible thing, the thing that came back. Love comes back. Not always in the same form, not always on the same timeline, but it comes back, as it did in the old world, as it has in every world since. And now the story is complete. The new world is green and quiet above the risen sea. Baldur and Hodur are talking in the fields. Lif and Lifthrasir are finding their way through a landscape that has never yet been named, and the ash tree, somewhere at the center of things, is already beginning to grow again, as it always does, as it always will. And so the story ends, as all stories must end, not with a final tidy resolution that leaves nothing unresolved, but with the quiet sense that something has been completed, that a journey has been made, that you have traveled somewhere ancient and returned gently to this moment, to this darkness, to this warmth, to this slow and steady breath. Your body is heavy now. Your mind is still. The thoughts that were moving through you when this evening began have settled, the way leaves settle after a long wind has passed through them, slowly and completely, until the air is still again, and the only sound is the quiet of a world at rest. There is nothing left to carry, nothing left to figure out, nothing waiting for you in this moment except the rest that your body has been asking for and that you have finally given it permission to take. You have done enough today. You have been enough today. Whatever the day asked of you, you met it. And now it is time to let the day go, completely, without reservation. The way the sun lets go of the sky each evening, completely and without hurry, trusting that it will rise again when it is time, trusting that the night will hold what the day has released. Let your breath find its own rhythm now, slower than before, deeper than before, the breath of someone who is no longer trying to do anything at all, just breathing, just being, in and out, in and out. The ancient world is quiet tonight. The gods have returned to their halls. The heroes have found their rest. The rivers and the forests and the deep places of the earth are still. And you are part of that stillness now, held by it, carried by it, safe within it. There is nowhere you need to go tonight, nothing you need to become, no version of yourself that needs to be maintained or performed or presented to anyone, just you, here in the dark, breathing, resting, already without any effort at all, doing exactly what you need to do. If sleep comes now, let it come. Welcome it the way you would welcome an old friend arriving after a long journey, without fuss, without ceremony, with only the simple and complete relief of something that belongs arriving exactly when and where it belongs. And if sleep takes a little longer, that is all right too. There is no urgency here, no deadline, no correct pace at which sleep must arrive. Just this breath, and this one after that. Each one carrying you a little further from the day, a little deeper into the quiet, a little closer to the rest that is already waiting for you just beneath the surface of this moment. We will be here again. Another story, another night, another journey into the ancient and the quiet and the true. Until then, sleep well, dream gently, and thank you truly for spending this time with Hypnos Stories. Good night.